Okay.
Okay, my lovelies. I'm hoping that we will appear live here in any moment. Just going to go and refresh over my end so I can see. I know many of you will be watching this on replay because I know it's still the school holidays. I know many of you will be catching this on the podcast as well. All right, it's looking good my end. I'm going to go press that magical record button. Hey, welcome to today's weekly live show and the Yoga Teacher Collaborative podcast. Whether you are watching us inside our Facebook group or you are on a walk somewhere in the car tuning into the podcast, I am really, really delighted that you are here. If I don't sound like I've got my teeth quite rightly in, see, even that wasn't right. I've literally just got back from being a guest on a retreat for the last week and haven't really landed in my kind of practical body and brain yet. I'm still airy fairy in Italy, eating pasta, doing Reiki, and all sorts of delicious things. But today's session was too good not to get it in today. So we are with Nadia today. Now, many of you know Nadia. You have maybe done a training with her, you connected with her, or you have done another session with Nadia right here in the Yoga Teacher Collaborative because she is a returner. We have a few wonderful yoga teachers that do return to these sessions because they offer us so much value. They have so much wisdom, so much to share, and we are in a very fortunate position to be able to soak up their magic. When Nadia was here with us before, we were looking at how you support pregnant yoga students during a group class. So I really recommend that you go back to that session. I will link it. I learned so much about, kind of even having a new registration form. So if you had a student for a long time, you've worked with them for a couple of years, then they're telling you the wonderful news that they're having a baby and that they would like to continue in class with you, and you feel that you are able to support them and their baby during that class. Nadia suggested at that point that you do another registration form more tailored to some of the questions appropriate during pregnancy, the kind of questions that we would check in with weekly. So there was so much value in that, and I learned so much. So if that's something that you're doing, I really suggest listening to that, or if that's something that's coming up for you, listening to it. We will touch a little bit today on classes. This is actually now more of a deep dive into what is happening in pre and postnatal yoga classes. How do they differ to group classes? Why might you consider supporting students in that more specialist environment as opposed to adapting a group class for them? So a slightly different route that we're exploring today. So make sure you go back and tune into the other one as well. So now we've laid that foundation. Nadia, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I'd love you to just say hi and introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Laura, for that lovely introduction. As you shared, it's my second time on your show, and I'm really delighted and grateful to be here again. So thank you for having me on. And as you mentioned last time, we talked a lot about accommodating pregnant students in general yoga classes. And in fact, a couple of your audience came and joined me on that workshop that I was running. Was it last year or the year before? I forget. Maybe
I have
last
no idea.
year. Well, either, but a couple of your students came along afterwards and joined the workshop, which was just wonderful. And as you know, my passion is pre and postnatal yoga. It is yoga supporting the incredible journey of motherhood. And as we well know, with the majority of our students still being female, motherhood is an inevitable consequence of teaching yoga, full stop. Our students, not all of them, but some of them, will inevitably become pregnant, And if you're pregnant, you're also going to be postnatal as well. So I'm happy to talk about any aspect, and I'm really looking forward to hearing some of your questions.
So we definitely do have a structure for today, that sometimes we go off on a tangent. And I'm sorry to go off on a tangent immediately because I personally don't have any children. I have three fairy babies, but I don't have any children. And actually, my inner circle don't really have children either. So it's not a world that I am as familiar with. And I really noticed a shift of language then that was quite powerful for me. So I've been writing a lot about, welcoming you here, talking about pregnancy and pre and postnatal. But you use the word motherhood then, supporting students through motherhood. So can we actually just start there? What holistically is the difference for you when you're guiding your students through specifically pregnancy, pre and postnatal, and then your shift there to using the word motherhood?
Good question. And actually, it is a question that really brings me into what are the deeper aspects of yoga.
Mm,
So often, we think about yoga as asana, as a physical practice. And certainly in the broader experience of pregnancy and childbirth, often, yoga in the GPs or is kind of represented as physical practice. If you do these postures and you breathe, learn to breathe, that will serve you well in childbirth. But as you and I know, and lots of the teachers that are listening to this, yoga is so much more than that. It is a truly holistic mind, body, and soul practice. It is a pathway for the alleviation of suffering and a pathway for self-awakening. And in that sense, it supports all of us on all journeys. And of course, for women, the journey of pregnancy, childbirth, the fire of childbirth, and then the difficult challenges of adapting to motherhood on the other side require so much more than just asanas, body positions, exercise, and learning to breathe. And so it's the deeper aspects of yoga practice that helps support very much the experience of matrescence. And matrescence is a kind of a hot word in our
never
culture.
heard that word.
Well, there you go.
Matrescent.
Matrescence. So matrescence is like adolescence. So we know when we think about teenagers making that transition from being children to adults, they go through a difficult period. Their hormones are all over the place. They are extricating themselves from one role. They are in this kind of liminal place where they're not yet adults, but they're not children anymore. And it's inherently difficult. It's kind of marked by a process of separation while they find their new identity. And there's a lot of kind of suffering involved. And matrescence helps us to understand, especially those of us who are not mothers themselves, supporting mothers, partners, everybody else, helps us to understand that women becoming mothers go through an equally challenging emotional, physical, spiritual time. And it's
Mm.
also augmented by radical hormonal changes and by radical lifestyle change. 1 minute, there I am, only responsible for myself, having a lovely time, totally free. I, I give birth and suddenly I have no freedom anymore. I am totally responsible for this other being. My hormones are all over the place. I don't have my job anymore. My relationship has changed. It is a radical lifestyle change. And
Mm.
in our broader culture at the moment, we've got a lot of writers writing about that, writing about the emotional, spiritual, psychological challenges. And of
Mm.
course, our wonderful practice, when it is delivered in its full, whole way really supports all challenges, all emotional transitions. So I am particularly interested in that matrescence aspect. I always have been, as you know from our previous conversation, always interested in the emotional and spiritual journey of childbirth, especially because it's so tampered with and there's so much fear and control in it. There's so much fear in our society around it. And then again, coming back to yoga, yoga is the practice of the path of love. It's and the alleviation of fear through through tapas, through svadhyaya, through all the wonderful teachings of yoga philosophy. And those teachings not only help us to help our students to deal with the inevitable ignorance and fear that's out there around childbirth, but as I said, supports them through the fire of labor and then through the difficult transition into motherhood that can go on, for years.
That was really quite profound. Um, Thank you for that because, as I sort of said, it's not a journey I've been on myself, but I've been teaching for 15 years, and it was only after I'd been teaching for about 2 years that there was a student that'd been coming to me for a long time, that said she wanted to continue, and then we worked through it together. And I've only ever supported people in class during pregnancy. And at that point, my main focus is on their physical body's needs because my yoga classes is a generically philosophical spiritual journey for everyone and the collective journey. So then all I really change to support my students during pregnancy is how do I look after them physically staying in that room? I've never, and I've definitely heard mothers talking about what a spiritual journey becoming a mother is. I've really never thought about how a tailored specialist yoga class is supporting you through the spiritual evolution into motherhood. And spiritual evolution is so the key component of yoga for me. I've just really never thought of that. I've thought about pregnancy yoga as, okay, how do I keep you and baby safe? And how, yes, maybe do we make sure that you're in the best possible position to be facing the actual moment of delivery and then physically looking after your body afterwards. And it seems so simple to me now that why did I miss the yoga spiritual evolution and the spiritual journey of motherhood? And obviously today we're going to be talking about, on a very basic level, what is the difference between a group yoga class and a pregnancy yoga class? There immediately is a very different way of exploring it, that the spiritual philosophical aspects of yoga are now being tailored to this evolution of motherhood. So what do you just teach pregnancy yoga classes now, or do you have group yoga classes as well?
I do both. I do
Yeah.
both. And but before I answer that, I just want to just track back to, something that you said earlier, which I think is really important for all the yoga teachers who are not mothers to understand, is that, we are, for example, when I was in my early 30s, and I would go to an Ashtanga yoga class with this lovely teacher. Her name was Easter, and she wasn't a mother. And I was in this Ashtanga yoga class, and I was pregnant, and then she was also teaching. I think she just started teaching pregnancy yoga. She didn't have very many students because it was an Ashtanga, dedicated Ashtanga Shala. She'd just done her training, and so I remember her really as my Ashtanga teacher, not my pregnancy teacher.
Mm.
But at my last class, now I'd already had one baby, which had ended up as a C-section, and this was my VBAC. So I was attempting a vaginal birth after a C-section.
Yeah.
And because I had not completed the birth vaginally the first time, there was a real lack of trust, based on the fact that I hadn't succeeded the
Yeah.
first. And so you often hear in childbirth, no, trust your body. But
Yeah.
when the body doesn't, or apparently, because my firstborn was breech, and it was a difficult labor and so on, and I did labor, but it ended up as a C-section. So I had this kind of fear of lack of trust, doubt in my capacity. Now, my teacher, she had no children, but she was a passionate yoga teacher, and I really remember, how things stick with you, things speak to
Yes.
you. And I really remember that last session and that last day, and all she said to me was, just trust your yoga, be with your yoga, use your yoga. And it was her conviction in her yoga landed on me. And it spoke to me as one, yoga student from yoga teacher, trust your yoga. And I really did, I kept going back to that as well, again and again. And so here was me, a mother, finding support and guidance from a non-mother.
Yeah.
Through the fire of the practice, through the fire of yoga. And I wanted to just pick up on that because, as you say, you haven't gone through the experience of pregnancy yourself. Many teachers who go on to teach pregnant students have not gone through the experience of pregnancy themselves, who go on to teach pregnancy yoga specifically because they have understood and because they believe so much in the power and the guidance of the practice for all periods of transformation, of which this is, in a woman.
Really pleased you brought that up because I love supporting students during that journey and it feels a true privilege. But I have never myself ever looked at a pregnancy training because I thought not like officially not allowed, but I felt not allowed. I felt that, and I guess that I hate using the word imposter syndrome, but I guess actually some of that, like, oh no, you can't, like that door's closed to you. You can't go and do a pregnancy or a postnatal yoga teacher training course because you've not been through that journey, almost like somebody wouldn't go and take yoga teacher training if they'd never done yoga. How dare I go and take a pregnancy yoga teacher training when I've never been through pregnancy? I think I thought that door was just closed.
Imposter syndrome.
Yes, I hate that phrase.
It's so horrible.
I prefer demon of doubt, but
Yes, well, I mean, I know that lots of people have that thought, and it's a myth, and it's a myth that I really want to debunk because, I mean, I also work as a birth doula. I have for many years, and I know some passionate birth doulas, amazing birth doulas, who have never had children, but they feel a call to be there and support women at this kind of quintessential time of the female experience for those who wish to take that journey. And I've had many yoga teachers come on my training who are not who are not pregnant, who have never been pregnant, who are teaching. I'm just thinking of one in particular who came through who did the training last year, and her classes are packed. Her pregnancy yoga classes are packed because she loves working with women. She loves yoga for the feminine, and yeah, and I've had 2 years ago, I think, or maybe 2 years ago, I had a guy, a male teacher, join the class, and
wow.
he wrote to me and he said, I'm really cool to do this. I don't plan on. He said, I don't plan on teaching pregnancy yoga classes, but I often have, pregnant women in my classes, and I really want to be able to support them properly on a one-to-one
Wow.
basis as well. I know, and it was a joy to have him. And on that particular training, I had my partner, who is a mindfulness teacher. teach, because my course is yoga with mindfulness, yoga and mindfulness, and I had my male partner teach the mindfulness. So there was a real masculine presence
Mm.
on that training, which was really special,
That's
actually.
amazing. And that actually just made me think of something else. Um, that that man came on with no intention of teaching pregnancy yoga, but wanting to be more supportive, be more present, be more able to actually teach people that are pregnant in a group class. And yeah, I think that would probably make me feel a lot more confident, a lot more able to support the entirety of the journey. Going,
Yeah.
okay, so I'm not going to go on that journey of motherhood. I know the physical aspects of looking after my students in a group class, but how do I show up in a much more holistic way? Yes, you could, of course, I take a pregnancy yoga teacher training without any intention of setting up a pure pregnancy class, just to be more supportive for your students in your general classes. Would that be fair?
Yes, that would be absolutely fair. I mean, I do run, as you know from our last
Mm.
session, I do run a special series of workshops, two workshops, which are geared specifically towards being better able to accommodate pre and postnatal students in your regular classes.
Yeah,
And they are different to, they're modules, if you like, on the
yes,
two bigger trainings.
yeah,
So, but yeah, I mean, for those who are interested, often they come to that workshop and they enjoy it so much and they find it so fascinating that they think, actually, I want to go deeper.
want to do more.
I
Yeah,
want to do more. I
yeah.
want to understand this more.
And then talking about the having not been through pregnancy and could I do a pregnancy teacher training course? Suddenly, of course, I thought, well, midwives. There'll be many a midwife. I know some people train really young to be midwives that haven't, as of yet, been on that journey of motherhood themselves. And I don't think anyone says you can't be my midwife because you've not been on that journey yourself. So thank you for that. I really appreciate that. So going back to especially because you teach specialist classes and you teach general classes, do you have anyone during that continues going to your general classes during pregnancy, or would people always move to your specialist classes?
Good question. So, um, because I certainly have had when I was I'm not teaching any in-person classes at the moment. All my classes are online. But when I was teaching my in-person classes, yes, I had one student who stayed with me in my 8 p.m. general class until she gave birth.
Yeah,
And because it didn't suit her, the class before was the pregnancy class.
yeah,
The timing didn't suit her because
yeah,
she had a little, she had a toddler to put to bed. So
yeah,
she would put her toddler to bed and then she would come to my class. And she stayed right up until she gave birth at the front of the class with me. She was an experienced yogi. She knew her
yeah.
body, and I gave her all the modifications that she needed, and she was really happy and enjoyed very much the depth of the classical practice.
Yeah. So it's
Uh,
nice she was able to make that choice. So
yeah.
I have familiar and comfortable in that realm. I've never stepped into a pregnancy yoga class. What would you give me an overview of what does a pregnancy yoga class look like? Because I can imagine my head goes sitting on bouncy ball. My head has a picture of what I think a pregnancy yoga class looks like. So I'd love you to educate me. Probably not like my mind thinks.
So, I think if you were to come on my training, Laura, your eyes would be opened and you would find it deeply interesting because yeah, that's what we tend to see on Instagram. We tend to see a lot of women with big bumps on balls, and I would call that third trimester yoga.
Yes. Okay.
So we see a lot of third trimester women with big bellies on balls and in kind of archetypal positions, what I call the key positions for birth. But when I teach pregnancy yoga, and I run two pregnancy courses, which I kind of interchange. One is the 12-week yoga and mindfulness pregnancy course, and the other is the maternity chakras. And on both, you know, the chakras really inform my practice.
How long's the chakra one?
The chakra one is 9 weeks.
Yeah.
So
And the other one's 12.
7 weeks, a 7-week journey, and then, two classes either side to frame and introduce. But the chakras, and I teach about the maternity chakras on the main training, and then I have a dedicated training for the teacher training for the maternity chakras. The chakras really inform all my practice, but they especially inform my pregnancy practice. And if you think about the chakras, then you can imagine how that might play out in asana work. So, we will spend the first three, in a 12-week, when I teach it to my students, I'll kind of span it out over a 12-week term, and we'll spend 3 sessions with Muladhara, exploring grounding practices, rolling around on the floor, and really feeling how that grounds the nervous system, how if we touch our body and feel our body, it helps us to come into our body. We will really work with what is Mula Bandha and the pelvic floor, and how we need to let go of a classical Mula Bandha practice and really rediscover our pelvic floor and deepen and develop that neural connection with all the different muscles that are kind of coming together down there. So much more in-depth and sophisticated look and exploration of Mula Bandha. We will really look at our emotional relationship with our pelvis, with our vulva. So it's kind of, it's very female centric. And so that's just, and then we'll look at stability. What is stability? What is steadiness? And how stability and steadiness serve us well in pregnancy, and specifically in childbirth, and stability and freedom, stability and ease, and how that works during childbirth. So that's just Muladhara.
Yeah.
And then we'll move on to the second chakra, Svadhisthana, and we'll look at flow and fluidity and how to move. We'll look at transitions and just being in the space of transition. And I really kind of, we do one practice where we're just doing free movement and letting our bodies guide us where they want to go. So it is a kind of, we move away from classical practice, and we go deeply into kind of more somatic practice and how that serves us, how that helps.
That feels more classical yoga to me than aside from, classical structured asana, but this is feeling more depth of yoga than I expected.
Yeah. And it's everywhere in yoga these days, isn't it? We're not kind of just practicing Trikonasana and then, so it's much more kind of, it's been feminized. All of yoga has been feminized because, so many leading teachers today are female and have really brought that in. And of course, that is exemplified in pregnancy yoga. And there's not a ball in sight.
I love that. I noticed then you said the first one's 12-week. You offer a 12-week course and you offer a 9-week course. So in that 12-week course, my brain is like, I love that it's a course because I mentor a lot of yoga teachers on business aspects, and the business aspects of pregnancy yoga I know can really challenge people with should it be courses, should it be shorter courses, should it be longer courses, should it be drop-in? But in a 12-week course, would you have people in different trimesters, or do you kind of start them staggered and people join at the appropriate trimester?
I'll get the majority will be more or less in the right place, just because they wouldn't, to sign up for a 12-week course, you're
Yeah,
not fine. But I always say I always say join whenever you can. Better to attend one class than no classes, because even in one class, you'll get some key techniques.
yeah,
So my classes are open to everyone, and just because the nature of the 12-week course means that people kind of become aware of it, think, oh yeah, okay, I'll sign up. But it's open to anyone from 14 weeks, which is when pregnancy yoga classically starts. I tend not to get people signing up at 14 weeks because, as you know from our previous conversation, 14-week yogis tend to want to stay in their own class.
mm-hmm.
And they tend to join pregnancy yoga later. So I think I'd say the average gestation of a pregnant woman in one of my classes and in most classes is really 24, 26 weeks
Yeah,
onwards.
yeah. No, that's really interesting from that. And you always do it as a course. So from the business point of view, um, do your courses roll back to back? Do you do like a 12-week course, then a 12-week course? How does that work?
So because, as I say, I work only online at the moment, I always run them as courses
Yeah,
for from for the business perspective, and because it helps to have a journey, and it helps to kind of course, if you're teaching in a studio, the class is always ongoing, and that makes perfect sense. But it is lovely to have a direction.
mm.
um, and then on top of that, because I'm a mother and I have 4 children, although 3 of them are getting quite grown up now, I work with the school terms. So
Yes,
I stop for the holidays and when all my kids are around, and then I start up again when they go
yeah.
back to school.
So if someone was recommended to you and you were like halfway through a 6 weeks into a 12-week course, would you just refer them on, or would they kind of begin at the next block?
No, they could start if they wanted to start, they could start straight away, and I would just integrate them, and they could just roll over
Yeah.
and
So
catch.
they would still sign up for 12 weeks. It would just be a different 12 weeks.
Or they have the option, if they've got 12 weeks. If they haven't
Yeah.
got 12 weeks, they sign up for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So I do a kind of pro rata. You
Yes.
run to the end of the class from the point of joining, or if you've got the whole 12 weeks, roll over to the next term,
Yeah.
exactly.
That sounds a really balanced way to have consistency for you and to be as flexible and supportive to other people, I guess, especially as it's online as well.
Yes, but to your point about having mixed gestations
Yeah.
in one class, that's very much a reality for pregnancy yoga teachers. And part of the training, of course, is being able to hold the different needs of those different
Yes.
stations, because the needs of the end of the third trimester are very, very different to the needs of a 24-week
Yeah.
pregnant mom.
And I can see that that's something you really, really need guidance, training, and practice in, because my mind
Yeah,
did absolutely go to when I try and have people doing chair yoga and people doing mat yoga in the same
yeah.
class, and that challenge of really adapting that. And yes, if you had people at far opposite ends of their pregnancy, yeah, I can see that's quite a skilled journey to be holding that.
Yes, and I'm just thinking of another student who did my training, who did say to me, when we were doing, when we would go through all the practices, she's like, oh, these practices are so amazing for just gentle beginners. And also
Mhm.
she mentioned she also did a class for the elderly, and gentle class, for seniors. And so, a lot of these practices that we use in pregnancy can be kind of uh, spread out and used in lots of different gentle,
Yeah,
gentle.
I thought that when you spoke about the pelvic floor, that actually, that's a really important journey for. everyone. I'm just going to say
Yeah,
everyone with that,
exactly.
you know,
Everyone.
really starting to understand that relationship with the pelvic floor because most people don't have one. A
Yeah.
relationship to a
And
relationship.
the simple feminization of the practice, the kind of, because so much of classical yoga is straight lines and
Yes.
feminine, this much more feminine body of yoga is spirals and circles and waves and
Yeah.
undulations. And it's just it's broadening your scope of movement, the
Yeah.
possibility of movement for your body.
Yeah. Okay. Let me regroup. So we have looked at the beginning of what is the difference between a mat-based class, sorry, a general class and a pregnancy class. You spoke then through sort of what the journey might look like in terms of how you guide it through the mindfulness, how you guide it through the chakra system, and that was really interesting. Is there, because going back to my mind that sees people sitting on balls, is there like sharing circles in there as well and time for people to discuss their feelings around the motherhood journey?
Absolutely.
That's
And
how long's a class?
so well, when I run my yoga and mindfulness class, it's 90 minutes.
Yeah.
Exactly that reason. And also that kind of leads me on to, well, let's stick with pregnancy and then let's hop over on that subject to postpartum, postnatal as
Yes.
well, because it's so important for postnatal. It's so important for both. And so the classes that I run and the classes that I encourage my students to run are 90 minutes if possible. Of course, if
Yes.
you're in a studio, you're a tight schedule, they might not allow that. But even with a 75-minute class, the opening circle is key. And giving women that opportunity to show up, to share their experience, to ask questions, and to connect at this, transitional time, particularly as they move into later pregnancy, they start to feel pressurized by, at the moment, induction is it's a huge issue for women. So many women are being induced. If you're 40 years old, it's almost 100% induction.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
yeah, it's a real problem at the moment. And so sharing.
Why is there more of a push to induction? Sorry, to sidetrack us there.
It's a radical sidetrack, and I'll just summarize it because one could really go down a rabbit hole with the issue of induction. Just the way in which the health system is moving at the moment is towards absolute minimization of risk. And what that means is even if the risk is really, really small, because studies show that the risk of stillbirth goes up slightly from 39 weeks to 40 weeks, according to one study that was done, that was taken up in America. They brought the induction they brought the whole induction process forwards, and that has influenced the maternity system over here. And so if you have more than, like being 40 is considered a
Mm,
risk. If you're
mm.
39 and a half, it's not risky, but if you're 40, it's a risk, and you'll just be automatically, these are guidelines for 350,000 women giving birth every year. So as soon as you reach 40, you're a risk, and therefore you should be offered induction at 40 weeks.
Mm,
Usually it's offered at 41 weeks, any sort of risk, and it's offered
mm.
increasingly early. And of course, risks can be what the health system defines as risk, can also, be something that is marginal.
Yes.
So lots and lots of women have to deal with induction, and because it's so looming, it creates anxiety, and it's really
So you
important.
discuss, you give space for people
Yes.
discuss this in an opening circle.
Exactly. And the teacher learns how to advocate and how to
Yes.
self-advocacy. So it's a very important part of the training. And again, it comes back to the yoga philosophy of Viveka, to be discerning,
Mm.
and also trust, to develop that deep trust in your own body and in your baby, and not to buy into the endemic fear that is out there.
So in a 90-minute class with an opening circle, how much time does that take of a 90-minute class?
It's variable and it will depend. So sometimes I will have a specific question for everyone to explore. Perhaps we'll start with a meditation and then I'll ask them to go. Classic part of mindfulness, of course, is to reflect on your meditation experience and share it, which helps in the learning of and the recognition of what you're doing. So we might start with an opening meditation, and then talk about it, talk about how we're feeling in our bodies. That will lead us into what's present for us today, and inevitably things will come up. So it can be anything from, just depending on the size of the group, from 15 minutes sometimes to even half an hour.
Now that's a very different skill to that's not, obviously I run retreats, it's a skill I've learned, but it's a very different skill to a 60-minute class when actually people will say hi and chat on their mat and there'll be a feeling of community, but to actually facilitate and hold that group when you've got differing conversations, differing opinions, people sharing in quite a vulnerable way. That is quite a skill to hold that circle. Is that something that you spend a lot of time on in your training as well?
Absolutely. And again, it's important to reiterate that that's what I do. And I've been
Yeah.
working in this field for, 20 years now. So
Yes.
what I do is different to what I might guide my teachers to do.
Yes.
But certainly we do very much cover circle holding, space holding, how to deal, with how to deal with what happens if somebody cries, what happens if somebody breaks into tears when they're feeling vulnerable, what happens if someone is taking too much space and others aren't
Mhm.
talking. How do you manage that? Certainly, again, the teacher will, it's really important, and we talk about this on the training. You teach what you know, and you
Yes.
teach what you're comfortable with. So, for example, because I am a birth doula, I can go deeply into that.
Yes.
But I certainly wouldn't expect somebody who's not a birth doula and who's not deeply kind of in that world, which many, many, many pregnancy yoga teachers are not, to go into that. But to space hold, for example, again,
Yes.
coming back to the philosophy of yoga, or coming back to the practices of mindfulness, which is just simply how to be with your vulnerability. Everyone can do that because we
Yes.
all feel vulnerable and we all experience fear and we all experience doubt. And working with these practices is in the teachings of yoga, and it is in the teachings of mindfulness, and
Mm.
learning to hold and learning to hold ourselves with compassion, learning to feel anxiety in our bodies, and just breathe into it and let go of the anxious thoughts. Those are the fruits of the practice of mindfulness.
Mm.
So that's what we learn on the training: how to work with difficult emotions, how to cultivate compassion. So this is all part of the mindfulness training, and then going into all of the beautiful teachings of Patanjali as well, and how that can support this radical life change,
Mm.
which is what it is. And that's available to everyone, which is why, as I said, when she said to me, be with your yoga, just
Yeah.
use your yoga. Actually, that is in the fire of the labor. It's that, it's yoga that gets you through. And it's that is the beautiful, deep teachings of yoga that kind of that carry you through.
I have found this so illuminating. And, I found the first session we did on supporting students during pregnancy in a group class, I found that deeply illuminating. But this even more so, just from that simple understanding that I don't have to have been through the journey of motherhood myself to take a specialist qualification and to begin specialist classes, that actually there'd be value taking a specialist qualification, even if I didn't want to take specialist classes, that the true depth of it from supporting, yes, adapting the asana, but supporting the journey, the space holding, weaving in the yoga philosophy through this journey, and actually how what you learn in the specialist courses is still going to filter into all the other ways you personally practice yoga, you teach yoga, and that is life, isn't it? When we learn anything, it filters into all aspects. I have found this truly illuminating, and the training sounds so in depth and so full of integrity. It sounds wonderful. So what is the process of taking training with you? So if somebody wanted to just train with you because you sound like the most amazing teacher that everyone would learn from, or training with you because they wanted to become a specialist, what's that journey look like?
So, uh, I just want to say one last thing, Laura, before we go on to that, just to kind of cap what we were, because it is like I hosted a webinar, I think, earlier on this year, and the title was something like how to bring more spirituality to childbirth. And it was a webinar for doulas, mainly doulas. I mean, some yoga teachers came, but it was a webinar for doulas. And, the whole point, and I gave a talk for Doula UK on a similar subject, about the deep sadness that at that time of childbirth, spirituality is missing. And it is, coming back to yoga, coming back to the chakras, or, the heart chakra, or the seventh chakra, Sahasrara, or even the sixth chakra, and the mythological realm. Really, the only kind of birth ed that's out there that does that is yoga. And,
Yes.
it is the missing link. Spirituality in childbirth is the missing link because it's been so clinicalized,
Mm,
because science has taken over childbirth, medicine has taken childbirth away. We all go to hospital, and we're all in triage, and we have epidurals, and we have inductions, and there's no spirituality there at all.
mm. Yeah, I think so many women crave to have, they might not use the word spiritual birth, but they crave to have a birth where they feel in touch and present and in the journey. I think women crave that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like it's not something that's being having your hand held and guided.
Well, there, of course, there are other practices out there that are helping women to kind of feel safe and feel grounded and feel able to kind of and feel psychologically strong. But still, that's something different,
Yeah.
to letting go. And letting go is at the heart of the teachings of yoga. And so again, why do we do this? Ultimately, pregnancy yoga really, whether you're into that word or whether you want to ground it in something more, I was going to say more secular, but that's not the right word. It is implicit in the teachings and the practice of yoga, is this, is the recognition that ultimately it is about letting go of control, letting go of ego, letting go of attachment, letting go of outcome, and surrender. Surrender to your body, surrender to nature, surrender to the divine. And
Mhm.
so, when you start to work with pregnancy yoga, you really work deeply with yoga because women need to be able to let go. And never in our lives, for most women, first time mothers, giving birth aged, let's say mid-30s in the Western world. We're not really suffering here. The majority of us, I know some people, of course, do suffer, but we are never really called to let go in that way until we meet this incredible experience of child.
Yeah.
Long rabbit hole, but I just wanted to.
No, thank you. And that has been my main takeaway is actually the spiritual, philosophical way that pregnancy yoga guides this journey. That has been the main light bulb for me.
Yeah, depth practice. So, okay, well, my 12-week yoga and mindfulness for pregnancy and birth teacher training. I say it's only because I'm kind of course director, but I am accompanied by 3 fabulous teachers who teach alongside me, who are all yogis, passionate yogis, and birth workers as well. So there are 4 of us. We are a team of 4, and collectively we teach this 12-week yoga and mindfulness for pregnancy and birth course. We have a course starting in September. It's a 100-hour training.
200.
100.
100. Yeah.
It's a 100-hour training. It takes place over 3 months.
Yeah.
And you can either attend it exclusively online, which many do, or if you are able to get to London, then you can attend as a kind of hybrid, mixed online and in-person training. So the training is basically 2 frame weekends, 2 3-day frame weekends, and then 6 weeks online in between. So those who do the in-person have the option of coming to London to do studio work, or while the others have a live stream, and then everybody travels online for the 6 weeks.
Yeah. Okay, so that's starting. Is it like mid-September it's starting?
Late September. So we start on the 27th. The dates are 27 September to the 1st of December. And the training we have triple accreditation now. So the course is accredited by Yoga Alliance professionals. It's accredited by FEDANT, which is the Federation of Antenatal Educators. And now it's also accredited by Doula UK, because it has a really strong birth education element, which is really kind of reassuring for those who are not mothers, so that they have a solid understanding of the birth experience. And the other thing that I want to say is that we also have a scholarship program. So if any of your listeners wanted to attend, but they're economically challenged, then we are offering 50% reduced scholarship places to those who are keen to apply and are economically challenged.
Yeah, and that's very generous. And I know that's part of this being your server, your work in this world to change the journey through motherhood. So to recap, it starts basically in a month. So people have a month to consider, to reach out to you, to discuss, to consider this journey. 100-hour training, triple accredited, 3-month course, can be done all online. So wherever you are, or if you are able and would like that kind of in-community support, there is a hybrid option. I love the timing of it, that it is September through to December. From a practical business point of view, it finishes at the end of December. That gives someone a good 6 weeks to get behind potentially launching a course to start middle of January, which is just perfect timing. So it's a really lovely flow, about a month to think about it, 3 months to train, start potentially offering classes or courses if they wanted to in the end of January. It works beautifully. And I can only imagine what an amazing journey that's going to be. Is the best place for someone to visit the teacher training, yoga teacher training part of your website. Is that the best place?
Exactly. Yes.
Good. So I will link that as well. But would you just read out your web address for me?
It's my name. So it's Nadia, Nadia, Raafat, Raaf for Foxtrot, A, T for Tango, NadiaRaafat.com.
And I will leave a link to that everywhere that I can as well. So, if this is tickled your brain and your soul as much as it has mine today, I can only imagine what 100 hours with Nadia and her team is like when we've spent an hour together today and the depth we've got from this. So if this is calling you, I urge you to reach out to Nadia and consider this path. I know it would be really, really rewarding. Nadia, thank you so very much for being here. Anything you wish to add before we close?
Just to thank you for having
Oh,
me
my
on,
pleasure.
for, being so magnanimous, and I really enjoyed our conversation. So thank
My
you.
absolute pleasure. My absolute pleasure. Okay, my lovelies, I will pop this on the podcast so you can get listening to this now. And any questions anytime, just reach out. Thank you, my loves. Bye for now.